Welcome to the Direct Insurance Podcast, Uncensored, where real talk meets real strategy for independent agents. Get ready for insights, expert tips, and some brutally honest advice to help you level up your business. Now, here are your hosts, Jason McClellan and Andy Daster, the Insurance Buddies.
All right, Andy. Hey, thanks for being with us. We've got a lot of exciting information to talk about today, and really kind of an extension of what we did yesterday at our IAD Sales Summit. So we talked a lot about what's on the horizon for under 65, but definitely wanted to introduce you, have you come out and talk about it with us. I know you're an expert in that area. You're doing a lot with those products. So give us a little insight, both introduce yourself, but then give us some insight on what's going on in the under 65 market.
As much as I don't like to say it, I'm now 35 years in the under 65 health insurance market.
Amazing.
And one of the things that has been the most consistent in that 35 years is that every year is different. Unlike in a lot of other spaces, life insurance business, it changes some, not a ton. Medicare's had a nice run, changes some, not a ton. Under 65 has been a year-to-year business. It just is. So agents have to keep up. Okay, with that being said, this year I think looks to be particularly disruptive. We're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of regulatory action that's going to change the opportunity for agents. But, as I mentioned yesterday, I think it's the opportunity of a lifetime.
Yep,
Don't worry about doom and gloom. This is going to be the greatest year of an agent's life. I think they're going to absolutely love what happens.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. And I do think, maybe the initial instinct of everyone is, oh, it's changing, it's terrible, but it's not.
No.
How many times have we said that change creates opportunity? You kind of it gets old saying that, but it's true, And what kind of changes do you foresee turning into these opportunities?
Maybe the first place to get started to answer that question, Jason, would be to say if an agent thinks there's a one-size-fit-all solution in the under 65 individual health insurance market, they got to get that out of their head.
Okay.
That's just not going to be the case. They've got to understand that there's going to be disruption in the ACA market. So let's start off with what some of the changes, starting with the regulatory changes that might occur in the ACA space upcoming this fall. And just to be clear, we don't have final rules yet. I'm only going based upon what the government has already published. They say is going to be in the final rule. But we won't get the final rule until we get the final rule, whenever that happens.
So we're going to get a little bit of what the rules are, and then maybe some color around that, how you feel that it might shake out then when we get to that point.
So let's hit them one at a time, because there's really, to me, when looking at all of the thousands of pages of regulatory rules, there's 6 that really come to my mind that seem like could have an impact on the overall ACA space. And that's, by the way, not including could there be rate increases on these plans? Are there more plan departures, which we already saw one carrier already announced that they're out, and there's going to be probably others that either reduce their footprint or get out of the business altogether. So we're going to put that aside because we don't know. We only know the one carrier that announced that they're out. Okay, so let's talk about what some of those regulatory changes are going to be. The first thing is the selling season is going to be reduced.
Okay.
In the last few years, we could enroll people in ACA plans from November the 1st all the way through the first part of the year. And we're going back to the original 6-week or so selling season, November the 1st to December the 15th.
Okay.
So what does that really mean? Well, first thing is with all the disruption, that means that agents are going to have to do a lot of work in a very short amount of time.
Right.
And the truth is they may not be able to get to everybody if they have sizable ACA books.
And we're talking, obviously we've seen kind of an influx of agents adopting the ACA, getting into the under 65, but they're also Medicare agents. So they're going to have some major overlap with those 2 seasons.
And they don't have the wiggle room that they've had in years past where the government would give us an extra month or 2. Yeah, we're not going to have that.
Okay.
So,
that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
So everybody listening, you better be aware and kind of plan those things out, ahead of time. And, we can always talk about technology that can be an aid, but that's important to know.
Top ACA producers have to be doing something right now. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to know everything that's going to be happening, but they got to get with their client and say, look, this is going to be a disruptive year. I don't know exactly what's going on. Here are some of the things that could happen, and here's what we're going to do to be prepared. If you don't, and you wait until November to deliver that message, you're crushed.
Yeah.
There's no way. You can't make it. So shortened selling season. Another potential regulatory change will be to increase the scrutiny on providing income documentation. It's been a little sloppy over the last few years, and the government hasn't really been checking that tightly, and so now there's going to be an increased scrutiny.
And that's pertaining to the credits or the
ACA subsidies.
ACA subsidies, yes.
So there's going to be more scrutiny around providing income documentation to demonstrate that that's in fact the subsidy that you're eligible for. Another one, we should talk about this one a little bit, is the tightening up of the SEPs. So just real quickly, there were a whole bunch of SEPs that unfortunately some call centers, some agents, and even some consumers could drive a truck through. It was too loosey-goosey. And so what ended up happening, and the carriers always hated these SEPs, is it allowed people to wait until they were sick, buy insurance, get whatever treatment they needed, and then drop it.
Yeah.
That's like your worst case scenario if you're a carrier, right? Is having people buy insurance when the house is burning, and then drop it as soon as they're
like
done.
the early days of Obamacare.
Right,
basically.
exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And the SEPs was one of the tools that were used to unfortunately really hurt the carriers. So they're happy to see the SEPs get tightened up.
Okay.
That's going to have an impact. Remember how you said there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen between November the 1st and December 15th? Well, now you're just adding another thing, because if you were doing SEPs around year-round, those are going to get tightened up, and that's going to make it even more crowded. But
that selling season, even though it's shortened, you're still going to have the second wave of that, correct? Going into the new year?
No. If you look at the regs, there will not be a second leg. There will be only November the 1st through December 15th for all January 1 effectives.
So no 2-1 effectives anymore. So that's gone.
That's gone.
Yeah, that's a big
The only way you get a 2-1
difference.
is if you genuinely have an SEP. And those are going to be tougher to come by. Moves, as an example. Getting married, as an example. Those you can easily provide documentation. Hey, I got married.
Yeah.
But there were others that were a little loosey-goosey, and people were taking advantage of.
Well, that's a big deal. Yeah, that's a huge change.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things, Jason, for your agency and distribution partners and agents that are listening to this, how much do you think they spend on the under 65 versus the Medicare side? Is the ACA business important to them, do you think?
We've got a pretty healthy mix of agents. So I would say more and more we're seeing some that maybe that's all they've specialized in. So, it's hard to, categorize it based on that. But we have seen more Medicare agents get involved in the under 65. Maybe it's because of spouse, or, they've just realized maybe there's still a financial opportunity there. They're being asked about it. They might as well get informed and be competent. But I would say it's probably, with most of our agents, still 70-80% Medicare.
Okay, so depending upon how important that commission stream is to an agent or agency might dictate as to whether or not they care about this or don't care about this.
Well, I think too, you got to remember, and we saw this a couple years ago at Medicarians, the increased attention and activity around under 65. And I think what it was a lot of unknowns on the Medicare front, changes coming, plans, carriers having challenges, and agents going, hey, this is just a natural transition. Maybe I should be offering more under 65. FMOs responded in the same manner. So I think that drove a lot of it too. And, that's gaining momentum.
And that's kind of where I was going with this. Yeah. So even if you don't have an ACA book that you're worried about, this is still the opportunity of a lifetime.
Okay. Let's get into that opportunity.
Yeah,
Well, is there any more regulatory or other changes that we should know about?
I'd say the only other one that I wanted to throw in there, because I think we hit that pretty good, is the minimum $5 rule, if that thing were to happen.
Explain that.
So what was happening is there were significant, it would seem to be mostly offshore call centers that were running around the country and signing people up for basically zero premium ACA plans. A lot of times people didn't even know what they were signing up for. They didn't realize they were authorizing anybody to do anything. And because they were zero, it was so easy to not have any money changing hands. So the government figured out that that was happening. And one of the regulatory rules that could be implemented in the final rule is the minimum $5 premium rule. And what that would mean is under certain conditions and certain circumstances, the zero would be gone. For ACA, remember. This is for ACA. So the minimum $5 rule is going to knock some people out because when they were getting free insurance, I'm sorry, it sounds weird that people won't pay $5.
Really?
But some people won't pay $5.
Okay.
They're fine with it when it was zero, and they're not fine with it when it became $5. I did want to just mention a couple last things. One is we have already seen the final rule on the maximum out of pocket.
Okay.
It's over $10,000 for an individual, $20,000 for a family.
Yeah, that's significant.
So with the last thing I wanted to mention is with all of that, all that change, it is expected by the government, by the way, that we're going to see a reduction of anywhere from 20%, maybe as much as 50% of the ACA market will evaporate.
Wow. That's huge.
That's huge. So if there's 20 million people on the ACA today, it could drop down to 10 million. And while that sounds extreme, keep in mind that was the number of people on the ACA before all these rules took place in the last administration.
Okay.
So it's not a ridiculous number. If agents are listening to this in Michigan, there's 400, 500,000 people in the state of Michigan on an ACA plan. Maybe 10% of them, 40,000. Maybe it's 100,000. And when we get to it, that's where the opportunity is because we have great alternative solutions.
But regardless of that unknown number, it's going to be a big number.
It's going to be a big number.
Yeah.
You pick a number. It doesn't really
it's
make
going
any
to be
difference.
big.
Whatever
and
it
people
is.
are going to be looking for a new home.
And they're going to be looking to land on something that they can afford, that provides them quality benefits, that provides them the type of coverage that they're looking for, and they're going to need talented, educated, knowledgeable, experienced agents to help them navigate because there's no exchange to find those kinds of products.
That's a wrap on this episode of DIP Uncensored featuring the Insurance Buddies. Still have questions? Head over to IADBrokerage.com to find helpful resources and connect with an independent agent who can guide you through the process. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you get your shows.